Thank you very much, Yal, and hello everybody, both here and virtually. Thanks to WWF and the Foreign Ministry for organizing this very timely event. I think we just heard a strong endorsement from the Minister for this agenda, which is quite exciting. Seems to be this micro. Is it this micro I'm using? Okay. So I'll stay here. It's great to see that strong endorsement from the Minister for this important agenda, and at UNEP we're of course very much aligned with this, and I just want to take us into a little bit of a deep dive of what nature-based solutions are. We have prepared, together with Stuart McGuinness from ICN, who'll speak later, a package of introducing nature-based solutions and what they can do. If I could have the next slide, please. So briefly, if you look at the definition, there are a few key words here that we need to unpack in the context of the Sustainable Development Agenda. The key word I especially want to draw your attention to is societal challenges. And every time you open the newspaper nowadays, it's full of societal challenges, as Bo and also the Minister said. Also, nature-based solutions have to provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. That is essential. Nature-based solutions are not geoengineering that can be harmful to biodiversity, and it's an important definition that IUCN has come out with. They're also coming out with a global standard on nature-based solution that Stuart will introduce, so I will not go into detail there. I can have the next slide, please. But what has the Sustainable Development Agenda really done to all of our work? It's something that is still playing out, but what we see is that we all used to work in the biodiversity agenda, in the humanitarian, in the peace, in the climate agenda. All these agendas are now converging, and that is very exciting, and it's high time. There is no longer such a thing as only the biodiversity agenda, or only the peace or the health agenda. And at the bottom of the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, is a healthy biosphere, healthy fisheries, intact ecosystems to produce our water and food, a stable climate that allows us to have gender equality, to have peace, to have stability. So investing in nature-based solutions is investing in the foundations of sustainable development. Next slide, please. Climate has received the biggest attention, I think, of all the SDGs in terms of nature-based solutions. And what is the potential of NBS for climate mitigation in this context? This is from the UNEP emissions gap report in 2017, where we had a special chapter on nature. So you can say roughly 1/3 of the mitigation potential lies in nature. This is without the oceans, though, so we'll have another deep dive into the ocean potential. But what is important is that something special about nature and the role in climate mitigation. You cannot only have nature-based solutions without strong mitigation in the other sectors. Because if we let the climate warm too much, forests will burn, wetlands will dry up, and all the carbon that is locked up in peatlands and the carbon stores will be no use. So we cannot have nature-based excuses. This is very important in the context of which industries invest in and how in nature-based solutions. Next, please. We've already heard about the multiple benefits of nature-based solutions, ranging from water and food security, energy security, to jobs and livelihoods. The next, please. What I would like to focus in, next slide, please, a little bit on is, of course, COVID-19. The majority of all zoonotic diseases come from areas that are degrading, forests that are degraded. Forest deforestation and forest degradation can accelerate the spread of malaria and other vector-borne diseases. This concept of One Health, that human health and planetary health is linked, has now received a lot of recognition in the course of COVID-19, but this of course goes beyond the role of nature in planetary health. It goes to the role of nature in a green recovery. I can have the next slide, please. So in UNEP we run a number of adaptation, forests, restoration, oceans and food platforms for nature-based solutions. Next slide. And forests, and especially trees, are a little bit the rock star amongst nature-based solutions at the moment. Everybody loves trees and forests. And that's also for a good reason, because they have the largest mitigation and also very large adaptation potential when you look at the climate solution. Here, we work mostly with the UN RED program that helps about 65 developing countries to better conserve, sustainably manage, and restore their forests. Next slide. The topic I would like to focus in on a bit more is restoration, because conservation alone is no longer enough. There's just been a really new paper in Nature released today, and also the Global Biodiversity Outlook is coming out next week, the Living Planet report. They all say the same thing. It's no longer enough just to stop the bleeding. We have to actively invest in restoration as well. And here we are fortunate enough that the General Assembly of the UN has decided to make 2021 to 2030 the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. All member states, even the ones that normally don't really agree on many things, have agreed on that. So that's a very powerful platform. That decade will start in a few months from now. The benefits of restoration can be huge. This is the Bonn Challenge of 350 million hectares of degraded land. If we restore that, about the size of India, we could generate $9 trillion in net benefits in ecosystem services. Next slide. So this is a sneak preview of the logo of the UN Decade that will be released in 4 days from now, so you're amongst the first people to see it. Everybody will be able to partner and link to this United Nations Decade. We're building a broad global movement to build more political will and build more capacity for restoration. We have about 400 organizations already lined up who want to partner, but as many as possible are welcome. So please join us also next Tuesday. There's a webinar for an Ask Me Anything option for potential partners who want to join the UN Decade. The official launch will be at the UN Environment Assembly in early 2021. Next slide, please. Just in a nutshell, this is the strategy of the UN Decade. We want to accelerate the global restoration movement that is already emerging, finance restoration on the ground by coordinating multiple investors like the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund, but also increasingly the private sector that has pledged a lot of funding now for nature-based solutions. But for that, we also have to set the right public incentives. We're still putting too much public money into fossil fuel subsidies and into agriculture subsidies that are harmful for biodiversity. Repurposing some of that money would unlock it could unlock several hundred billions of funding per year. At the moment, much of the money is spent on further degrading the environment, unfortunately. Celebrate leadership, shift norms and behaviors, including food and diet, invest in research, building capacity, and inspire a culture of restoration, and build up the next generation, and listen and learn. Next slide, please. We also work closely on adaptation with a platform on climate change adaptation and nature-based solutions. So in our Adapt with Nature platform, we would like to ensure that at least 500 million people are more resilient to climate change by adapting with nature by 2030. The minister mentioned the example of mangroves. We've done a survey of all the cost-benefit analysis of mangrove investments. So in a nutshell, you can get about between $9 and $10 in return for every dollar invested in mangrove restoration in ecosystem services. Next, please. So coming towards the conclusion, nature-based solutions is a broad concept, but it doesn't replace other existing concepts. This is also very important for us working in this space for many years or decades. It does not replace the ecosystem approach or ecosystem-based adaptation or all these other terms, sustainable forest management, that we've spent a lot of years developing and honing. It is an umbrella approach that makes sense in the context of sustainable development. It brings all of these approaches under one common approach that is solutions-oriented. Next slide, please. We have a lot of political momentum that is still building out of the Climate Action Summit in 2019. We are carrying that momentum forward as UNEP and with many other partners. Next slide, please. We also have, as the minister also said, we have a lot of important meetings coming up next year. In a sense, the super year for nature that was supposed to happen this year is got an extension into 2021. And importantly, here all the 3 Rio Convention COPs are next year, and they all have now a very large focus on nature, with REDD+ in the Climate Convention, sustainable land management, and of course the new biodiversity framework that we expect from the CBD. Next. So thank you very much. Join the generation restoration, our slogan for the UN decade, and look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Please stay on the phone, because please stay here for just a couple of minutes. There may be a question that we want to take from the audience to your presentation. Both here in the room, if there's a question on clarification or something you want to have answered now, you have the opportunity. That might also be from our virtual room. Right? Okay, perfect. Actually, I wanted to ask you a question right away, which is building back better and greener. And we have this opportunity now to actually accelerate some of these, accelerate the use of the toolbox. Are you already now seeing such opportunities are actually being put forward by countries? I mean, are we seeing it being applied already because of the COVID-19 need to opportunity to build back in a different way?
Not as much as we would like, but we're seeing it in a number of developing countries, such as India, Pakistan, Rwanda, Nepal. There's many examples where we see green recovery investments, both domestic and foreign assistance, be invested in nature, in particular in restoration, and we would like to see the same also, of course, in developed countries. So also for the EU with the new biodiversity strategy, with the farm to fork strategy, there is work coming up that can also happen at the EU level for more investments in restoration, because also the agricultural landscapes here are in need of restoration investments. And we're working now with finance ministers and the World Bank to also look at future fiscal policies and incentives to have this not be a very quick flash in the pan of recovery funds, but a long-term repurposing and rechanneling of fiscal incentives into nature-based solutions.